The issue of immigration laws in the country is back in the spotlight. Yesterday, a 36-year-old Zimbabwean national who has been charged with 7 counts of murder and 7 counts of kidnapping told the court that he has no documentation supporting his stay in the country. Last week, a police officer, 6 Home Affairs officials and a Mozambican woman were arrested after an investigation into illegal border crossings at the Lebombo border post. This is in Komatipoort. Now, the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Motsoaledi, said the Mozambican woman is believed to have masterminded the plot to bring people over illegally. Joining me now to talk about illegal immigration is head of the African Diaspora Forum, Dr. Vusi Sibanda, who talks to us from Johannesburg. Dr. Sibanda, thank you very much for your time. When you hear such cases, do you worry that this could potentially spark violence directed at foreign nationals?
Good morning and good morning to your listeners. Look, yes, indeed. I mean, when there are sentiments that particularly, look at how, people that are in the country, especially without documentation, even with documentation, it's a very patchy, situation now, considering, the levels of unemployment and dissatisfaction with service delivery, in South Africa. So yes, indeed, when such statements, come up, they are such a serious worry because it generally, heightens the negative perception that is directed towards migrant communities.
Yeah. Yesterday, I had a conversation with the former Johannesburg Mayor, Herman Mashaba, who now runs his own political party, Action SA. And he said these words, that the people of South Africa should actually direct their anger towards national government. This is not the fault of foreign nationals, nor is it the fault of South Africans. It has its roots to the weak immigration enforcement strategies by government. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Well, look, I don't know. It's very unfortunate that when we listen to Mr. Mashaba, I think, he tries to be politically correct, and at the same time, perpetuate, his sentiments that are always, anti-migrant. Now, you will realize that in talking to, weak immigration laws, South Africa has got a fully functional immigration act that deals with migration, and the enforcement of the laws, must be looked at holistically, especially in terms of, how, big this country is and the bordering countries, especially when you look at, policing, a country that has got more than 50% of its borders, being landlocked, and how that can obviously be done, and also look at the socio-economic and socio-political factors that influence the influx of people, coming into South Africa in terms of, its surrounding countries and how they are able to support its people, and that South Africa is always likely to have a serious problem, of people coming into South Africa that are fleeing, either political instability or economic, problems and starvation in their own countries.
Dr. Sibanda, let me ask you this question. When you're dealing with a matter like that of the 36-year-old Zimbabwean national who is arrested on several counts of murder, and he tells the court that, yes, I'm in South Africa illegally, and I do not have intentions to dispute the charges that are preferred against me. How should the people of Limpopo react, in your view?
Well, look, I think the people of Limpopo, like any other person, must, look at this person as a criminal, who obviously, admits, to the crimes that obviously he has committed. And, for that particular reason, we expect, in a normal, society and situation, that the people should be enraged, against crime, and obviously should also be looking at, how laws, should try and ensure that, people are documented. Because if this person is not documented and has not been caught, and he has killed these people, and even if his fingerprints were found, at the crime scene or on the bodies of those people that he killed, even the DNA, it would make it very difficult, for him to be traced. So definitely people should be aggrieved, but we need to look at the fact that there are issues that are beyond the government to even deal with, because to then say that can the government holistically and completely prevent people from crossing, especially at undesignated areas, that is something else. But when it comes to corruption, like you mentioned, that there were officials that were arrested, for working collusively, with, people, from outside South Africa to let people come into the country legally or use documentations that are fraudulent. People should also be enraged against, the crime of corruption, because those are the people that make it difficult for these laws to be enforced and that are defeating the ends of justice.
You say that in a normal country, and I put it to you that things are very abnormal in South Africa because you have a large population of Zimbabwe which finds itself here because of economic difficulties back home. In your view, how big a responsibility should the Zimbabwean government shoulder in matters such as the one that we now find ourselves, where a Zimbabwean national has committed serious crimes, let's say allegedly, because he has not confessed just yet? How should the government of Zimbabwe deal with such matters, and what responsibility, perhaps, is the central question, should they carry?
Well, look, I think when we speak in particular about the government of Zimbabwe, we then have to look into, the responsibility, that how responsible is the, Zimbabwean government when it comes to its citizens. You have rightfully said that the population of Zimbabweans in South Africa is quite huge. And one needs to ask, or the question begs, an answer as to why do we have such a huge population of Zimbabweans in South Africa? What is wrong with Zimbabwe? What is happening there that is not right? And then that would then bring us, to a question that says, with these levels, of crime and with the problems that South Africa is also facing socioeconomically and, in terms of job, how then can these, issues be, resolved? Which means the government, at government level, where the government of South Africa, through, SADC and, for example, the AU, the government of Zimbabwe needs to be taken to task, to answer as to why such a huge number of its people are found in South Africa, and what is the problem. And we all know what, the problem is, from, the days of, President Robert Mugabe to the days, that President Emerson Mnangagwa took over in 2018, when we saw, the soldiers in action as if they were in an action film movie, shooting people with live ammunition, automatic rifles, during, the dissent, or when the results of the national election were not, declared in time. So those are the issues that need to be addressed, and South Africa and all the countries in Africa and the United Nations are compelled, in terms of, the AU, statutes, especially on governance, to look at how the people of Zimbabwe must be protected from this government that makes them to flee their country. That is a crisis that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, I want to complete or conclude our conversation with the issue of corruption that you have raised. In South Africa, it's a known fact that we are dealing with abnormally high levels of corruption, but I would like to look at our neighboring countries, namely Mozambique. For example, the Minister of Home Affairs last week stating that the Mozambican woman was believed to be the mastermind plotting how to bring people from her country into South Africa illegally. And I'll pose the same question to Zimbabwean authorities as well. How efficient are South Africa's neighbors in dealing decisively with corruption in their countries?
Well, look, they are not efficient at all. They are not effective. They are actually, especially when you look at the government, they are actually the more culpable ones, because if you look at government, it's not only South Africa that is facing, serious problems, with corruption. Zimbabwe is, leading, from the top of the list as well. Look at, the issues of corruption that have been raised in that country, starting from the president's office. We also look at Mozambique. Remember the finance minister that we have here in South Africa. So corruption is endemic in all these countries. And therefore, they are not efficient at all in dealing with corruption. They claim that they deal with corruption when it involves the small fish, the ordinary citizens. But at government level, the rot is just beyond description.
Dr. Vusi Sibanda, thank you very much for your time. He is head of the African Diaspora Forum. This is one conversation that is firstly difficult to have because of the xenophobic tendencies that tend to come into play whenever there are difficulties or issues that implicate foreign nationals.